Before going to bed, I overheard a strange conversation between my daughter-in-law and my son. After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the nursing home. I kicked the door open and shouted, "Before you go, I'll show you a special film." And when I pressed play on the TV, my daughter-in-law fainted. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Edward, and I'm 67 years old. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost everything when my beloved wife Martha passed away from cancer. But I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything then. I was about to lose what little I had left, and it would come from the people I trusted most. It was the night before Thanksgiving, and I was shuffling down the hallway in my slippers, heading to the kitchen for my evening glass of warm milk. The routine had become sacred to me since Martha died. She used to make it for me every night, adding just a touch of honey the way I liked it. Now I made it myself, a small ritual that kept her memory alive. The house was quiet, except for the soft murmur of voices coming from the living room. My son Leonard and his wife Ava were having what sounded like a serious conversation. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but their voices carried down the hallway, and something in Ava's tone made me pause. "After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility," she was saying, her voice cold and matter-of-fact. "I've already spoken to Sunset Manor. They have an opening next week." My blood turned to ice. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it from the other room. "Are you sure about this timing?" Leonard's voice was hesitant, but not disagreeing, just concerned about logistics. "What if he asks questions?" Ava let out a sharp laugh that had no warmth in it. "What's he going to do, Leonard? He's completely dependent on us. Besides, we've been patient long enough. Your father takes up the entire guest room, and I'm tired of walking on eggshells around him. This house is too small for 3 adults. But he helped us with the down payment," Leonard said, though his voice lacked conviction. $25,000, Ava. That was his life savings. "And we're grateful," she replied smoothly. "That's exactly why we're not just abandoning him on the street. Sunset Manor is a nice place, clean, professional staff. He'll be better off there." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. $25,000. My life savings, the money I'd scraped together from 43 years of working at the steel mill, the money Martha and I had set aside for our retirement, for emergencies, for our family's future. I'd given it to them willingly when they said they were struggling to buy this house. "What about the rest of his money?" Leonard asked. "His pension? His Social Security? Power of attorney, remember?" Ava's voice was practically purring now. "Once he's in the facility, and we can prove he needs full-time care, we can manage all his finances. The pension alone is $1,800 a month, plus his Social Security. That's almost $3,000 monthly we can use to pay for this house." The walls seemed to be closing in around me. I had to grip the doorframe to keep from falling. These people, my son and his wife, weren't just planning to abandon me. They were planning to steal from me. They were planning to warehouse me in some facility and take control of every penny I had. "I just feel bad about it sometimes," Leonard mumbled. "Don't," Ava snapped. "Your father had his life. He raised you. He had his marriage. He had his career. Now it's our turn. We're young, Leonard. We deserve to enjoy our lives without some old man shuffling around, leaving his pills everywhere and monopolizing the bathroom for an hour every morning." Old man, that's what I was to them, not Leonard's father. Not the man who had worked double shifts to pay for his college education. Not the man who had walked him down the aisle at his wedding because his own father had abandoned him when he was 12. Just some old man taking up space. I stood there in that hallway, in my pajamas and worn slippers, feeling smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. The betrayal wasn't just Leonard's words or Ava's coldness. It was the realization that I had been living a lie for the past 2 years. Every smile, every "How was your day, Dad?" every "We're so glad you're here with us" had been a performance. "The papers are already signed," Ava continued. "I told them he has early-stage dementia and can't make decisions for himself anymore." "But he doesn't have dementia," Leonard protested weakly. "Who's going to know? He's old, he's grieving, he's confused. The staff at Sunset Manor deals with families like ours all the time. Adult children who can't handle the burden anymore." Burden. The word hit me like a physical blow. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to make myself useful since moving in with them. I cooked dinner 3 nights a week. I kept the yard immaculate. I paid for groceries every other week with my pension money. I babied their temperamental old furnace and fixed every leaky faucet and squeaky door in this house. I thought I was contributing. I thought I was earning my place. But to Ava, I was just a burden. "When do we tell him?" Leonard asked. "We don't," Ava said firmly. "We wake up Monday morning, pack his things, and drive him there, clean break. No drama, no arguments, no guilt trips. By Monday night, this house will be ours again. I couldn't listen anymore. My legs felt like they were going to give out, and I needed to get back to my room before they heard me. I crept down the hallway, each step feeling like I was walking through quicksand. Once inside my room, I closed the door as quietly as I could and sat heavily on the edge of my bed. The room suddenly looked different to me. This wasn't my room, I realized. This was their guest room. I was just a temporary occupant and my time was up. I looked around at my belongings, Martha's photograph on the nightstand, my clothes hanging in half the closet, my medications lined up on the dresser. 2 years of trying to build a new life. And it was all about to be packed up and shipped off to Sunset Manor. But as I sat there in the darkness, something else began to grow alongside the hurt and betrayal. It started as a tiny spark of anger, and it grew hotter with each passing minute. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was just some confused old man who would go along with whatever they decided. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I hadn't survived 43 years in a steel mill by being passive. I hadn't raised Leonard as a single father after his mother died by giving up when things got tough. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let some manipulative woman and my weak-willed son steal my life and my dignity without a fight. Leonard and Ava had made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was defenseless. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, and they had no idea what kind of feast I was about to serve them. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Ava's voice saying burden and old man. By 5 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and sat in my chair by the window, watching the sun come up over the neighborhood I'd helped them move into. This house, this beautiful 2-story colonial with the wraparound porch and mature oak trees, existed because of me. Not just the $25,000 down payment, though that had been everything Martha and I had saved. I'd also spent countless weekends here over the past 2 years fixing, improving, maintaining. I'd replaced the entire plumbing in the upstairs bathroom. I'd rewired the kitchen when the old electrical work started throwing sparks. I'd painted every room except their master bedroom. I'd poured my blood, sweat, and savings into making this house a home for my family, and they were planning to throw me away like yesterday's newspaper. As I sat there remembering, the anger that had started last night began to crystallize into something harder, more focused. I started thinking about Leonard when he was growing up and how different things had been then. His mother died when he was 16, cancer, just like Martha. I was 34 years old, working at the mill and suddenly trying to raise a grieving teenager by myself. I could have remarried. God knows there were women interested. But Leonard was so broken by losing his mother that I couldn't bear the thought of bringing someone new into our lives who might not understand what he was going through. So I focused everything on him. I worked extra shifts to pay for his college. I drove 6 hours each way every weekend during his freshman year because he was homesick and struggling. I paid for his wedding to Ava, a $15,000 celebration that nearly wiped out what little savings I had left after his education. I remembered that wedding day clearly now. Ava had insisted on an expensive venue, expensive flowers, expensive everything. Leonard had come to me, embarrassed but desperate, asking if I could help. "Just until we get on our feet, Dad," he'd said. "Ava's family expects a certain kind of wedding." Even then I should have seen the warning signs. Ava's family expected, but they weren't paying. It was always someone else's responsibility to fund Ava's expectations. But I'd said yes because I loved my son, and I wanted him to be happy. I liquidated the small investment account Martha and I had built up, and I handed Leonard a check for $15,000. I told myself it was worth it to see him smile on his wedding day. Now I understood the truth. I hadn't been buying Leonard's happiness. I'd been buying Ava's temporary approval, and the clock had been ticking ever since. I thought about the past 2 years, living in this house with them. All the little moments that I'd interpreted as love and care, I now saw with different eyes. When Ava insisted I join them for dinner every night, I'd thought she was being inclusive. Now I realized she was keeping tabs on me, making sure I wasn't getting too independent or making outside friends. When Leonard suggested I move in with them instead of staying in the apartment Martha and I had shared, I thought he was being thoughtful. Now I understood he was getting me away from neighbors who knew me, away from my routine, away from my independence. When they encouraged me to put their names on my bank account just for emergencies, I'd thought they were helping me plan for the future. Now I knew they were planning to rob me. The worst part was realizing how they'd isolated me. Back in my old apartment, I'd had Mrs. Rodriguez next door who checked on me every day. I'd had coffee every Tuesday with my old work buddy Frank. I'd had my routines, my independence, my dignity. Here I had nothing except what they allowed me to have. But they'd made a mistake. They thought 2 years of manipulation had made me helpless, but they'd forgotten something important about me. I might be 67, but I wasn't some doddering fool. I'd managed a crew of 30 men at the steel mill for over 20 years. I'd negotiated with union representatives and plant managers. I'd solved problems, handled crises, and made decisions that affected people's livelihoods. Those skills didn't disappear just because I'd retired. I got dressed quietly and made my way downstairs. Leonard and Ava were still sleeping, which gave me time to think and plan. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, just like I used to do when I was working through a problem at the mill. First, I needed information. I walked to Leonard's home office, where he kept all the household files. I'd helped him organize this filing system when they first moved in, so I knew where everything was. I found the folder labeled Dad's Documents and felt my stomach drop. Inside were papers I'd never seen before. Power of attorney documents with my signature, but I didn't remember signing them. Medical assessments claiming I had early-stage dementia, signed by a doctor I'd never met. And worst of all, admission papers for Sunset Manor with my information filled out and a deposit already paid. My hands were shaking as I read through everything. They hadn't just been planning this for a few weeks. They'd been setting this up for months, maybe longer. Every time Ava had suggested I see a new doctor for my memory issues, she'd been building a paper trail to support their lies. I photographed every document with my phone. Martha had given me this smartphone for my 65th birthday, and she'd taught me how to use the camera. "You never know when you might need evidence of something, Eddie," she'd said with a laugh. If only she'd known how right she was. Next, I checked their financial documents. Leonard had always been careless about leaving papers out, and I found their bank statements in a stack on his desk. What I saw made my blood boil. They'd been spending my down payment money on luxury purchases, a $5,000 weekend getaway to Napa Valley last month. Ava's new car, a BMW that cost more than I'd made in 6 months at the mill. Leonard's golf club membership, which ran $800 a month. They'd taken my life savings and used it to fund a lifestyle they couldn't afford, and now they planned to take my pension and Social Security to keep the party going. I photographed those documents too. But the real discovery came when I found Ava's personal phone, which she'd left charging on the kitchen counter. I knew her passcode because I'd watched her enter it dozens of times. It was Leonard's birthday. Her text messages told the whole story. Conversations with her sister about how Leonard's dad is finally going into a home and how they'd finally have some privacy. Messages with someone named Rick that made my skin crawl, talking about their special friendship and how she'd be free to travel once I was out of the picture. And most damning of all, a conversation with someone at Sunset Manor discussing my behavioral issues and aggressive tendencies that would justify keeping me sedated and isolated. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to drug me into compliance. I saved screenshots of everything and sent them to my own phone. Then I deleted the evidence of my snooping from her phone. As I sat there in their kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of their betrayal, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose, focus, the same feeling I used to get at the mill when a crisis hit and everyone looked to me for solutions. Leonard and Ava thought they were dealing with a confused, helpless old man. They were about to learn that they'd picked a fight with the wrong person. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, and I was going to give them a meal they'd never forget. Thanksgiving morning arrived gray and cold with a light drizzle that matched my mood perfectly. I woke up early, as I always did, and made my coffee in the quiet kitchen while Leonard and Ava slept in. For the first time in months, I felt completely calm. There's something liberating about knowing exactly where you stand, even when that place is on the edge of a cliff. I'd spent most of the previous day making preparations, and now everything was in place. Today would be the last Thanksgiving this family would ever spend together, though Leonard and Ava had no idea what was coming. By 7 in the morning, I was in the kitchen starting the turkey. Ava had assigned me cooking duties weeks ago, which at the time had felt like she was including me in the family traditions. Now I understood it differently. She wanted me to do the work while she took credit for hosting a beautiful holiday meal. It was fitting, really. One last time doing everything while they enjoyed the benefits. I stuffed the 20-pound bird with Martha's recipe, the one I'd been making for 30 years. As I worked, I thought about all the Thanksgivings Martha and I had hosted when Leonard was growing up. Our tiny apartment kitchen could barely fit the turkey, but we'd managed to feed Leonard and whatever friends he wanted to bring home from college. Those had been real family meals, full of laughter and genuine gratitude. This would be something else entirely. Around 9, Leonard wandered downstairs in his pajamas, yawning and looking for coffee. He seemed nervous, which told me he'd been thinking about their plan for Monday. Good, he should be nervous. "Morning, Dad," he said, trying to sound normal. "Turkey smells great." "Just like your mother used to make," I replied, not looking up from the potatoes I was peeling. She always said Thanksgiving was about being grateful for family. I watched him flinch slightly at that. Leonard had always been a terrible liar, even as a child. He got that from his mother, who couldn't keep a secret to save her life. It was one of the things I'd loved about her. Yeah, well, Leonard mumbled, pouring his coffee. Mom always made everything special. She did, I agreed. She also taught me that family loyalty is everything, that you stand by the people you love no matter what. Leonard's hand shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup, and I knew my words were hitting their target. He excused himself and went back upstairs, probably to report to Ava that I was acting strange. Let him. Today, I wanted them both on edge. Ava emerged around 10:30, dressed in a cream-colored sweater that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She'd done her hair and makeup as if we were expecting company, though it would just be the three of us. Everything about Ava was performance, I realized. Even her marriage to my son was just another show. "Edward, you've been busy," she said, surveying the kitchen with that fake smile she'd perfected. "Everything looks wonderful." "I wanted today to be special," I told her, meeting her eyes directly. "I have a feeling it's going to be memorable." Something flickered across her face at that. A moment of uncertainty, but she recovered quickly and started fussing with the table settings, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. Nervous energy, I realized. She was feeling the pressure too. Perfect. While they both bustled around the house, pretending everything was normal, I made my final preparations. I'd hidden a small digital recorder in the living room the night before, tucked behind one of Ava's decorative pillows. I'd also set up my laptop in my bedroom, connected to the living room television through the wireless system Leonard had installed last Christmas. Everything was ready. The meal itself was tense, though I don't think Leonard and Ava realized how obvious they were being. They kept exchanging glances, and Ava kept steering the conversation toward safe topics like the weather and Leonard's work. Neither of them mentioned any plans for the weekend, which was telling. Normally, Ava would spend the entire meal discussing her Black Friday shopping strategy. "This is delicious, Dad," Leonard said, cutting into his turkey. "You really outdid yourself." "I wanted to make sure everything was perfect," I replied. "After all, this might be our last family dinner for a while." Both of them froze at that. Ava's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, and Leonard's chewing slowed to a stop. "What do you mean?" Ava asked carefully. I shrugged, playing innocent. "Oh, just that the holidays are busy. People get caught up in their own lives. Sometimes families drift apart without even realizing it." "That's not going to happen to us," Leonard said quickly. "We're family. We stick together." The irony of those words, coming from someone who was planning to abandon me in 48 hours, was almost too much to bear. But I kept my expression neutral. "Of course," I said. "Family is everything." After dinner, we moved to the living room for coffee and the pumpkin pie I'd made from scratch. This was it. This was the moment I'd been building toward all day. "You know," I said, settling into my chair with my coffee, "I've been thinking a lot lately about family memories, about the importance of preserving the truth." Ava and Leonard were sitting on the couch together, both looking increasingly uncomfortable. "The truth?" Ava asked. "Well, yes," I said, reaching for the television remote. "Sometimes people remember things differently than they actually happened. That's why I've started keeping better records of important conversations." Leonard's face went pale. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I think it's better if I just show you," I said, and clicked on the television. The screen came to life, displaying my laptop desktop. I'd spent hours the night before organizing everything into a clear, devastating presentation. The first thing that appeared was a folder labeled Evidence. "What is this?" Ava demanded, but her voice was already shaking. "This," I said calmly, "is the truth about our family." I clicked on the first file, and the audio from their conversation 2 nights ago began to play through the television speakers. Their own voices filled the room, crystal clear and undeniable. "After Thanksgiving, he goes straight to the facility. I've already spoken to Sunset Manor. They have an opening next week." Leonard's coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the hardwood floor. Ava's face drained of all color as she listened to her own voice discussing my behavioral issues and how they planned to drug me into compliance. "Turn it off," she whispered. "Oh, but we're just getting started," I said, and clicked to the next file. This time it was screenshots of their text messages blown up large enough to read easily. Ava's conversations with her sister about getting rid of the old man. Her messages with Rick about their affair and her plans to travel once I was taken care of. Leonard's emails to Sunset Manor, lying about my mental state and authorizing them to sedate me if I became difficult. "You can't do this," Ava said, but she was swaying in her seat like she might faint. "Actually, I can," I replied. "It's all perfectly legal. These are recordings made in my own home, of conversations about my own life. I have every right to document threats against my well-being. I clicked to the next file, their bank statements showing how they'd spent my $25,000 down payment on luxuries. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "Dad, please," Leonard began, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished," I said, and clicked on the final file. This one was a video I'd recorded that morning. Sitting in this very chair, it showed me, calm and clearly competent, explaining exactly what Leonard and Ava had planned to do to me. I detailed their lies about my mental state, their plans to steal my pension and Social Security, and their intention to have me drugged in a nursing home. "This video," I said as my recorded image spoke on the screen, "along with all the other evidence, has been sent to my lawyer, to the police, and to the State Attorney General's office for elder abuse investigation." That's when Ava finally broke. She let out a strangled cry and pitched forward off the couch, hitting the floor in a dead faint. Leonard scrambled to catch her, but he was too late. I looked down at them both, him kneeling on the floor trying to revive his unconscious wife, her lying there like a broken doll, and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "The funny thing is," I said conversationally as Leonard patted Ava's face trying to wake her up, "I really was planning to go along with whatever you decided. I thought maybe you knew something I didn't about what was best for me." Leonard looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We can fix this." I shook my head. "No, son. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be paid for." As Ava began to stir on the floor, moaning softly, I stood up and walked toward my bedroom. I had phone calls to make and arrangements to finalize. The real Thanksgiving feast was about to begin. The silence that followed was deafening. Ava lay on the living room floor, Leonard kneeling beside her with a wet cloth he'd grabbed from the kitchen. She was conscious now, but barely coherent, mumbling something about lawyers and mistakes. Her perfect Thanksgiving outfit was wrinkled and stained with spilled coffee, and her carefully styled hair hung in her face like wet strings. I remained standing by the television, the remote still in my hand, watching them both with the detached calm of someone who had finally stopped pretending everything was fine. "Help me get her to the couch," Leonard pleaded, but I didn't move. "She'll be fine," I said. "Shock wears off quickly, trust me, I know." Leonard managed to help Ava sit up against the couch, and slowly her eyes focused on me. The look she gave me was pure hatred, mixed with something I'd never seen from her before. Fear. "You have no right," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Those were private conversations. In my house," I replied calmly, "about my life, about stealing my money and having me drugged. I'd say I have every right." "It's not your house," she snapped, finding her voice. "Your name isn't on the deed." I smiled at that. It was the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. "Actually, Ava, that's where you're wrong." Leonard looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when I gave you that $25,000 down payment, I didn't just hand you cash and walk away. I went to the closing with you, remember? I signed papers too. I insisted on being added to the deed as a partial owner, proportional to my contribution." The color drained from Leonard's face as he remembered. "But the lawyer said exactly what I asked him to say, that it was a family gift. But the legal documents tell a different story. I own 37% of this house, Leonard. You can't sell it without my permission, and you certainly can't kick me out of it." Ava struggled to her feet, swaying slightly. "That's impossible. We would have known. You would have known if you'd read the documents instead of just signing wherever Leonard pointed. But you were too excited about getting your hands on my money to pay attention to the details." I walked over to Leonard's home office and returned with a folder I'd retrieved earlier. Inside were copies of all the closing documents with my ownership percentage highlighted in yellow. 37%, I repeated, placing the papers on the coffee table. "Plus, since you've been using my pension money to help pay the mortgage for the past 2 years, that percentage has actually increased. My lawyer estimates I now own approximately 42% of this property." Leonard was staring at the papers like they might catch fire. "But why didn't you tell us?" "Because I trusted you," I said simply. "I thought we were family. I thought you'd treat me with respect and dignity. I never imagined you'd try to steal from me and warehouse me in a facility." Ava was regaining her composure and, with it, her viciousness. "You're a manipulative old man. You tricked us." "I protected myself," I corrected. "Something I learned to do after 43 years in a steel mill, dealing with people who thought they could take advantage of me." She lunged toward the television, trying to grab the remote from my hand. "Turn that off. Delete everything." I held it out of her reach easily. "It's too late for that, Ava. Everything's already been uploaded to cloud storage and sent to multiple recipients. Even if you destroyed my laptop, the evidence would still exist." Leonard was reading through the deed documents, his face growing paler with each page. Dad, this changes everything. We didn't know you owned part of the house. It changes nothing, I said firmly. You still planned to steal from me. You still lied to doctors and nursing homes about my mental state. You still conspired to drug me and take control of my finances. The fact that you didn't realize I could fight back doesn't make your crimes any less serious. Ava was pacing now, her hands shaking with rage. Crimes, don't be ridiculous. We're your family. We were trying to take care of you. By lying about my mental health, by planning to have me sedated, by stealing my pension, I shook my head. That's not care, Ava, that's elder abuse and it's a felony. The weight of that word, felony, hit them both like a physical blow. Leonard sank into his chair and Ava stopped pacing. What do you want? Leonard asked quietly. I want my dignity back, I said. I want my independence back, and I want both of you out of my life. You can't kick us out, Ava protested. Even if you own part of the house, we own the majority. True, I agreed, but I can make your lives very uncomfortable. I can refuse to sign any sale documents if you decide to move. I can demand my share of the equity if you want to refinance. I can invite friends over whenever I want, since this is my home too. I can play my music as loud as I want, cook whatever I want, come and go as I please. I paused, letting that sink in. Or, I continued, I can make this very simple for everyone. Leonard looked up hopefully. What do you mean? I mean, I'll sell you my share of the house, fair market value based on a professional appraisal. You can buy me out and I'll disappear from your lives forever. Ava's eyes narrowed. How much? I'd already had the house appraised, of course. I'd been busy over the past 24 hours. The current market value is $380,000. My 42% share comes to $159,600. Leonard choked. We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll need to get a loan. Or sell the house and split the proceeds. Either way, you'll have your freedom and I'll have mine. This is extortion, Ava hissed. No, I said calmly. This is business. You wanted to steal my pension and Social Security to pay for your lifestyle. This way, you get to keep your house, and I get fair compensation for my investment. Everyone wins. Ava was looking desperate now. What about the nursing home? We've already paid the deposit. That's your problem, I replied. You should have asked me before making decisions about my life. Leonard was staring at his hands, finally understanding the full scope of what they'd done. Dad, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm ashamed of what we planned. Are you? I asked. Or are you just sorry you got caught? He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm sorry I let Ava convince me that this was the right thing to do. I'm sorry I betrayed you. I'm sorry I forgot everything you taught me about integrity and family loyalty. For a moment, I almost softened. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd sacrificed everything for. But then I remembered his voice on that recording discussing my behavioral issues and agreeing to have me drugged. I appreciate the apology, I said finally. But it doesn't change anything. Trust once broken can't be repaired with words. Ava had been quiet for several minutes, but now she spoke up, her voice cold and calculating. Fine, we'll buy you out, but it will take time to arrange financing. You have 30 days, I said. After that, I start charging rent for my bedroom and I'll be inviting friends over regularly. Remember, this is my home too. 30 days isn't enough time, Leonard protested. It's more time than you were planning to give me, I pointed out. Monday morning, remember? Pack his things and drive him to Sunset Manor? Leonard winced at his own words being quoted back to him. I've already spoken to a lawyer, I continued. Everything is documented and legal. If you try to force me out or interfere with my daily life in any way, I'll file charges immediately. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud. The authorities take these things very seriously these days. Ava was studying me with new eyes as if seeing me for the first time. You planned all of this. I protected myself, I corrected again. Something you should have expected from a man who survived 67 years in this world. The afternoon sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the living room. What should have been a peaceful Thanksgiving evening felt more like the aftermath of a war. In a way, I suppose it was. I'll be in my room, I announced, standing up. I suggest you two start making some phone calls. Banks, mortgage companies, whatever it takes. The clock is ticking. As I walked toward the hallway, Ava called after me. You'll regret this, Edward. Family is all you have left. I turned back to look at them both, sitting in the wreckage of their schemes and lies. No, Ava, I said quietly. Family is what I thought I had. What I actually had was two people using me until I was no longer useful. The difference is, I finally learned to tell the difference. The last thing I heard as I closed my bedroom door was Ava's voice, sharp and angry. berating Leonard for his stupidity and weakness. Their perfect marriage was already showing cracks under pressure. Good. Let them turn on each other. I had my own future to plan. The next 3 weeks passed in an atmosphere of Cold War. Leonard and Ava moved through the house like ghosts, speaking to me only when absolutely necessary, and conducting their frantic phone calls behind closed doors. I could hear fragments of their conversations, desperate calls to banks, heated arguments about credit scores and loan applications, bitter fights about whose fault this whole mess was. I, meanwhile, had never been more productive. I spent my days reorganizing my life with the methodical precision I'd once used to manage mill operations. I opened a new bank account at a different institution and had my pension and Social Security deposited there directly. I hired a moving company to pack up and store Martha's belongings, things I'd been too sentimental to deal with before. I even bought myself a new car, a reliable Honda that would serve me well in whatever came next. Most importantly, I contacted my old friend Frank, who'd retired from the mill 3 years before me. His wife had passed 6 months ago, and he'd been struggling with loneliness in the big house they'd shared for 42 years. "Eddie," he'd said when I called, "I was just thinking about you. How's life with the kids?" "Complicated," I'd told him. "Actually, that's why I'm calling. How would you feel about getting a roommate?" By the end of that conversation, Frank and I had worked out an arrangement that would benefit us both. He had a 4-bedroom house with no mortgage and too much space for one person. I had a buyout coming that would let me pay my fair share of utilities and groceries while maintaining my independence. We'd known each other for 30 years, fought side by side through union negotiations and plant closures. We understood each other in ways that didn't require explanation. Leonard and Ava, meanwhile, were discovering just how financially precarious their position really was. Without my pension money helping with the mortgage, they were stretched thin. Leonard's salary as a mid-level manager barely covered their basic expenses, and Ava had never held a steady job in the 3 years they'd been married. The luxurious lifestyle they'd built on my money was crumbling fast. On a gray December morning, exactly 26 days after Thanksgiving, Leonard knocked on my bedroom door. "Dad, can we talk?" I opened the door to find him looking haggard and defeated. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unwashed, and he had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "What's on your mind?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "We can't get the loan," he said simply. "Every bank turned us down. Our debt-to-income ratio is too high, and with Ava not working." He trailed off, staring at the floor. I waited, letting the silence stretch. "The thing is," he continued finally, "we called around to some real estate agents. Even if we sold the house after paying off the existing mortgage and the real estate fees, there wouldn't be enough left to pay you your share." "I see," I said calmly. "And what does Ava think about this development?" Leonard's face twisted with something between pain and embarrassment. "Ava thinks we should fight you in court, try to prove that the ownership documents were signed under duress or something." "And what do you think?" He looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the 16-year-old boy who'd lost his mother all those years ago. "I think I've already lost my father, and fighting you in court won't bring him back." For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt a flicker of the old affection for my son, but it was immediately tempered by the memory of his voice on that recording, casually discussing how to drug me into compliance. "What are you proposing, Leonard?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I was hoping maybe you had some ideas." I studied his face for a long moment. There was genuine remorse there, I thought, but also desperation. Leonard had always been weak-willed, easily influenced by stronger personalities. First by his grief after his mother died, then by his desire to please Ava, now by his fear of losing everything. "I might have a solution," I said finally, "but you're not going to like it." Hope flickered in his eyes. "What is it?" "Ava has to go." The hope died instantly. "Dad, I can't just—" "She's the problem, Leonard. She's always been the problem. You were a decent man before you married her, and you might be one again after she's gone, but she's my wife. She's a woman who convinced you to betray your own father for money," I said bluntly. "She's a woman who's been cheating on you with someone named Rick while planning to use my pension to pay for her affair." Leonard's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "I have her text messages, remember? She's been seeing this Rick person for months. They have plans to travel together once you got my money under control. Did you really think she'd stick around once the financial pressure got too intense?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd saved. Leonard read them in silence, his face cycling through shock, pain, and finally, a cold anger I'd never seen from him before. "She's been planning to leave me," he said quietly. "The moment she got what she wanted." I confirmed. "You were just a means to an end, son. A way to get access to my money in this house." Leonard sank into the chair by my window, holding his head in his hands. I'm such an idiot. You're a man who fell in love with the wrong woman, I said, more gently than I'd spoken to him in weeks. It happens to the best of us. What am I supposed to do now? You divorce her, I said simply. You file for divorce on grounds of adultery, and you use those text messages as evidence. Then you and I work out a new arrangement. Leonard looked up at me suspiciously. What kind of arrangement? I'll forgive the debt in exchange for full ownership of the house, I said. You can continue living here while you get back on your feet, but the house becomes mine. No more pretending we're equals when I'm the one paying the bills. And then what? Then you decide what kind of man you want to be, I said. The kind who honors his commitments and treats his family with respect, or the kind who schemes and lies to get what he wants. Leonard was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the backyard he'd planned to enjoy while I rotted in a nursing home. She'll fight the divorce, he said finally. Let her try. I have enough evidence of her adultery and her financial abuse to bury her in court. Plus, she has no income and no assets of her own. What's she going to fight with? What about Rick? What about him? He's been having an affair with a married woman who was planning to steal from her elderly father-in-law. You think he's going to stick around when this gets messy? Leonard nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. You really think she'll just leave? I think Ava is a predator who moves on when her current target stops being profitable, I said. Give her 2 weeks of legal bills and public humiliation and she'll be gone. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of the front door slamming. Ava was home from whatever shopping expedition she'd been on, probably charging more debt to credit cards they couldn't afford to pay. Leonard, her voice called from downstairs. Where are you? We need to talk. Leonard and I looked at each other. Now or never, I said quietly. He took a deep breath and stood up. I guess it's time to find out who I really am. As we walked downstairs together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Respect for my son. Not love, not yet. That would take time to rebuild if it ever could be. But respect for a man finally ready to face the consequences of his choices. Ava was in the kitchen, surrounded by shopping bags from expensive stores. She looked up as we entered, and I saw her eyes narrow as she took in our unified front. What's going on? She asked. But her voice was already tense with suspicion. Leonard walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up his laptop. I need to show you something, Ava. Leonard, what are you doing? But she was already backing toward the door, her predator's instincts telling her that the game had changed. I'm showing you some text messages, Leonard said, opening the laptop and turning it toward her. Messages between you and Rick about your plans for after we got control of Dad's money. Ava's face went through the same color changes I'd watched Leonard experience upstairs. Shock, denial, fear, and finally, cold calculation. Those are fake, she said quickly. He's manipulating you, Leonard. Can't you see what he's doing? Are they fake? Leonard asked quietly. Are the messages about leaving me once you got what you wanted fake? Are the plans to travel with Rick fake? Ava glanced between us, realizing that her usual tactics weren't going to work this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, more honest than I'd ever heard it. Fine, she said. Yes, I was planning to leave, but can you blame me? Look at this life, Leonard. Look at what we've become. Struggling to pay bills, taking care of your decrepit father, stuck in this boring suburban nightmare. So you decided to steal from him and abandon me? I decided to take what we deserved and start over somewhere better, with someone who actually has ambition. Leonard nodded slowly, as if her words were confirming something he'd already known, but been afraid to admit. I want you out, he said simply. You can't kick me out. I'm your wife. Not for much longer. Leonard's voice was steady now, resolved. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. Adultery and financial abuse. Dad has evidence of everything. For the first time since I'd known her, Ava looked genuinely afraid. Leonard, please, we can work this out. I'll break it off with Rick. We can go to counseling. It's too late for that. You'll have nothing without me, she said desperately. You'll lose the house, your credit will be ruined, you'll be stuck taking care of your father until he dies. Leonard looked at her for a long moment, then glanced at me. Maybe, he said, but at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. Ava's desperation turned to fury in an instant. You're both pathetic, she snarled. A weak, spineless man and a manipulative old fool. You deserve each other. She stormed out of the kitchen and we could hear her stomping around upstairs, presumably packing. Leonard and I stood there in the silence, listening to drawers slamming and closet doors banging. How do you feel? I asked him. Terrified, he admitted, but also relieved, like I can finally breathe again. Within 2 hours, Ava was gone. She left with 3 suitcases and a stream of threats about what her lawyer would do to us. She also left behind about $15,000 in credit card debt and a car lease she couldn't afford, but she was gone. That evening, Leonard and I sat in the living room where this had all started a month earlier. The atmosphere was completely different now, not warm exactly, but honest in a way it had never been before. "I'm sorry, Dad," Leonard said quietly. "I know I keep saying that, but I need you to know I mean it." "I know you do," I replied. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "Whatever it takes," he said, "however long it takes." I nodded. "We'll see." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, I was sitting on Frank's back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded me of the sunsets Martha and I used to watch from our old apartment balcony. The peace I felt was something I hadn't experienced in years, not the exhausted quiet of someone who'd given up fighting, but the deep satisfaction of someone who'd fought and won. Frank emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 beers and his famous grilled cheese sandwiches. At 71, he moved a little slower than he used to, but retirement had been kind to him. We'd fallen into an easy routine over the past months, 2 old friends who understood the value of companionship without constant conversation. "Any word from Leonard today?" Frank asked, settling into his chair with a grunt. "He called this morning," I said, accepting the beer gratefully. "The divorce is final as of yesterday." "How's he holding up?" "Better than I expected. Ava tried to fight for half the house, but when her lawyer saw the evidence of adultery and financial abuse, they settled quickly. She got nothing except her personal belongings and her debt." Frank chuckled. "Karma's a funny thing, isn't it?" "Sometimes," I agreed. "Leonard's been working 2 jobs to pay off the credit cards she left behind, but he says it feels good to be earning his way honestly again." The truth was, Leonard had surprised me over the past months. Without Ava's influence, he'd reverted to something closer to the man I'd raised. He was working as a manager at a local hardware store during the day and doing freelance bookkeeping in the evenings. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and he seemed to take pride in it again. He'd also been slowly paying me back for the money they'd stolen, $500 at a time. I didn't need it. My pension and Social Security were more than enough for my modest needs, but I understood that he needed to do it. Some debts weren't really about money. "You know what I heard today?" Frank said, taking a sip of his beer. "Mrs. Patterson from down the street told me that Ava's been calling around the neighborhood, trying to get people to feel sorry for her, claiming you and Leonard conspired against her." "What did Mrs. Patterson tell her?" "That anyone who'd try to put a good man like you in a nursing home against your will deserved whatever she got." Frank grinned. Apparently Ava didn't like that response. I wasn't surprised that Ava was still trying to play the victim. According to Leonard, she'd moved in with Rick temporarily, but that relationship had soured quickly once Rick realized she came with baggage and no money. Last he'd heard, she was living with her sister in another state, still claiming that everyone had treated her unfairly. Some people never learned to take responsibility for their choices. My phone buzzed with a text message, and I smiled when I saw it was from Leonard. "Having dinner with Sarah tomorrow night, thought you should know." Sarah was a nurse at the clinic where Leonard had been getting counseling. She was a widow with 2 teenage children, and from what Leonard had told me, she was everything Ava wasn't: kind, hardworking, and completely unimpressed by material possessions. They'd been taking things slowly, which showed a maturity in Leonard that I hadn't seen in years. "Good news?" Frank asked, noticing my smile. "Leonard's got a date tomorrow night." "The nurse?" "The same one." I'd told Frank about Sarah, of course. After 6 months of living together, we'd shared most of our important stories. "I think this one might be different. You sound hopeful." "I am," I admitted. "For the first time in years, I think Leonard might actually be happy. Really happy, not just trying to please someone else." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "What about you? You happy?" It was a good question. Was I happy? I thought about the past year. The betrayal, the confrontation, the months of rebuilding. It had been painful, but it had also been necessary. "Yes," I said finally. "I think I am." And I was. Living with Frank had given me something I'd lost without realizing it: independence. We shared expenses and companionship, but I wasn't anyone's burden or responsibility. I cooked when I felt like it, went to bed when I was tired, and spent my money on things that brought me joy instead of funding someone else's lifestyle. I'd also reconnected with old friends from the mill, men I'd lost touch with during the years I'd spent trying to be the perfect father and grandfather to people who didn't appreciate the effort. We met for coffee twice a week and played poker every Friday night. For the first time since Martha died, I had a social life that belonged to me. "You know what the funny part is?" I said to Frank. I was actually ready to go along with their plan. If they'd just asked me honestly about moving to a care facility, if they'd treated me with respect and included me in the decision, I might have agreed. Really? Really? This house was getting too big for me after Martha died. I was lonely, struggling with basic maintenance, worried about what would happen if I fell or got sick. Part of me thought maybe they were right, that I needed more help than I wanted to admit, but they didn't ask. No, they decided for me. They lied to me, stole from me, and planned to drug me into compliance. And two, they treated me like a problem to be solved instead of a person with rights and feelings. Frank was quiet for a moment, watching a cardinal land on the bird feeder we'd hung from the old oak tree. My daughter wanted to put me in a place after Helen died, he said finally. Said she was worried about me being alone in this big house. What did you tell her? I told her I'd consider it when I was ready, but that I wasn't ready yet. She respected that. He smiled. Having you here has shown her that there are other ways to handle getting older. She's stopped bringing up the nursing home idea. Good, I said. Everyone deserves to make their own choices about how they want to live. As the sun continued to set, I found myself thinking about Martha. She would have been horrified by what Leonard and Ava had planned, but I thought she would have been proud of how I'd handled it. Martha had always been the stronger one in our marriage, the one who stood up to bullies and protected the people she loved. In fighting for my independence, I'd finally learned to channel some of her strength. Edward? Frank's voice interrupted my thoughts. Yeah? I'm glad you're here. This old house was getting too quiet without Helen. I'm glad I'm here too, I said, and meant it. My phone rang and I was surprised to see Leonard's number. He usually texted unless something was wrong. Dad? His voice sounded strange, excited but nervous. What's going on, son? I need to ask you something. It's about Sarah. I felt a smile tugging at my lips. Go ahead. I want to ask her to marry me. I know it's only been 6 months since the divorce, but we've been talking about it and we both feel ready. But I wanted to ask for your blessing first. The request surprised me. The old Leonard would have just announced his decision, probably after Ava had already planned the whole wedding. This showed a consideration and respect that had been missing for years. Tell me about her, I said. She's nothing like Ava, Leonard said immediately. She works hard, she's independent, she pays her own bills. She's raised 2 kids mostly on her own after her husband died in Afghanistan, and she's done an amazing job. They're good kids, respectful and responsible. How does she feel about your situation? The debt, the struggle to rebuild? She respects it, Leonard said. She says she'd rather be with someone who's working to fix his mistakes than someone who never makes any. She's not looking for someone to take care of her financially. She wants a partner. I thought about that. A partner. What a different concept from what Leonard had had with Ava, where he'd been expected to provide while she consumed. What about her kids? How do they feel about you? They're cautious, which I think is smart. Their mom has been single for 4 years and they're protective of her, but they've been respectful. And I think we're building trust slowly. And you? How do you feel about becoming a stepfather? Leonard was quiet for a moment. Terrified, he admitted, but also excited. These kids have been through a lot, losing their father and watching their mother struggle. I want to be someone they can count on, someone who adds stability to their lives instead of chaos. The maturity in his voice was remarkable. This wasn't the same man who'd been willing to drug his own father to avoid inconvenience. You have my blessing, I said finally. But more than that, you have my respect. You've become the man I always hoped you'd be. I could hear Leonard's intake of breath over the phone. Thank you, Dad. That means everything to me. When are you going to ask her? Tomorrow night? I saved up for a ring. Nothing fancy, but something meaningful. I want to do this right. After we hung up, Frank looked at me expectantly. Good news? The best, I said. I think my son is finally growing up. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, I felt a contentment I hadn't known was possible. My family had broken apart and rebuilt itself into something different, something honest. Leonard was becoming a man I could be proud of, and I was living a life that belonged entirely to me. It wasn't the ending I'd expected when I overheard that conversation on Thanksgiving night. It was better. Because sometimes, when you finally stop trying to be what other people want you to be, you discover who you really are. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who matter most discover it too. The old Edward, the one who'd been willing to sacrifice his dignity for the illusion of family harmony, was gone. In his place was a man who knew his worth and wouldn't